Sometimes the smallest things you stumble across can crack open the life you thought was solid. A single piece of paper, a few lines of text, and suddenly the person you trusted most feels like a stranger wearing your husband's face. My name is Quinn Hayes. I am 27 years old. Last summer, my husband Peter and I made the drive down the coast to the family cottage near Monterey. It was the annual gathering his parents, Patricia and Larry, always hosted, the 1 week a year when everyone tried to pretend the rest of life didn't exist. I used to look forward to it. The foggy mornings, the sound of the waves, the long dinners where stories got told and plans for the next year got made. This time, the car ride felt heavier. Peter was quiet, eyes on the road, and I kept catching myself wondering why Natalie, my best friend since college, had been invited again without anyone really asking me. We arrived in the late afternoon. The cottage sat on a low bluff above the water, weathered shingles, big windows that caught the light, even on gray days. Peter carried the bags inside, while I stood on the porch for a minute, breathing in the salt air and trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. Little things had been adding up. Peter canceling plans we'd made together to help Natalie with something. Family group texts I wasn't added to until after decisions were already discussed. The way he and Natalie seemed to finish each other's sentences lately, laughing at jokes I wasn't in on. I told myself I was being sensitive, that marriage had seasons and this was just one of them. But the feeling didn't leave. That first evening, everyone gathered in the living room. Patricia fussed over the charcuterie board. Larry poured drinks. Cousin Olivia, quiet as always, sat in the corner with a book. Family friend Tina asked about work, and Natalie was already there, curled on the couch like she belonged. Peter sitting close enough that their knees touched when he leaned in to show her something on his phone. I tried to join the conversation about the cottage repairs everyone kept mentioning. Peter, I thought we were going to look at the budget together before we decided anything big. He didn't even look up from the screen. It's just some ideas right now, Quinn. Natalie had some good thoughts about keeping costs down. You don't have to worry about every little thing. The words landed soft but sharp. Natalie gave me a small, sympathetic smile that somehow made it worse. Yeah, it's nothing major. We just want the place to feel good for everyone this week. I nodded because what else could I do in front of his parents? But later, when everyone drifted to their rooms, I stayed behind to straighten the kitchen. My hands moved on autopilot while my mind replayed the moment. We. Peter and Natalie had become a we when it came to family things that used to be ours. The next morning, most of them went on a hike. I said I had a headache and stayed behind. The cottage was quiet except for the sound of the waves and the occasional creak of the old floors. I went into the bedroom we always used, the one with the big window facing the water. I was unpacking a few things when I opened the bottom drawer of the old dresser to put away some sweaters. Something slid forward under the folded clothes. It was a plain white envelope, the kind you get at the bank. No writing on the outside. I almost closed the drawer again. It felt private, maybe something Peter had tucked away, but the corner was sticking out like it wanted to be found. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages and what looked like a forwarded email. The first message was from Peter to Natalie, dated 3 weeks earlier. Quinn will just stress about the numbers if I tell her now. The contractor can start next month. I'll move the money over tonight. You're right, it's easier this way, Natalie had replied. Exactly. She overthinks everything. You're doing the right thing protecting her from the details. I've got the invoice if you need it. My chest went tight. I kept reading. There were more. Plans for the cottage that I had never been told about. A transfer from our joint savings account that I hadn't seen. And one line that made my hands go cold. Sometimes I wish she could just let me handle the family stuff without making it about her feelings. You get it, Nat. You always have. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the papers shaking slightly in my fingers. This wasn't about money. Not really. It was about being cut out. About my husband deciding that my best friend understood our life better than I did. About important moments, decisions that shaped the year ahead happening without me in the room. I thought about all the times I had stayed quiet when Peter said he and Natalie were just catching up. All the dinners I had smiled through while they talked about things I hadn't been invited to help plan. The carefully built picture I had of us as a team handling life together started to feel like something I had made up to feel safe. I folded the pages and put them back in the envelope, then slipped the envelope into the bottom of my own bag. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. I only knew I couldn't unsee it. That night at dinner, the table felt smaller than it should have. Patricia passed around a big bowl of pasta. Larry talked about the new railing he wanted on the deck. Peter and Natalie sat across from me, their heads close as they looked at something on Natalie's phone. I cleared my throat. Peter, can we talk later about the contractor stuff? I'd like to understand what we're spending from the joint account before anything gets signed. He set his fork down slowly. The whole table went quieter than it should have for a casual dinner. Quinn, it's really not a big deal. Natalie already got the quote, and it's reasonable. You don't need to turn everything into a whole thing. Natalie reached over and touched his arm just lightly. She's probably just tired from the drive. Don't push her. The words were soft, but they landed like a door closing. I felt my face get hot. Olivia, who almost never spoke up, looked at me for a second with something unreadable in her eyes, then looked back down at her plate. After dinner, I stepped outside to get some air. The neighbor from the next place over, Wayne Bailey, was walking his dog along the path that ran between the cottages. He waved. "Evening, Quinn. Saw your husband and that friend of yours out on the deck real early this morning. They were going over some papers. Looked like serious business. Hope everything's all right with the old place." He said it kindly, just making conversation, but the ground under me shifted a little more. They had been out there without me again, talking about our life, our money, our family gathering. I managed to smile. Yeah, just planning some fixes. Back inside, I waited until everyone had gone to bed. The house settled into that particular quiet that only old cottages have. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone and opened the security app. The cottage had cameras on the front and back installed after a break-in scare a couple years ago. I had never really used them before. I scrolled to the footage from that morning. There they were. Peter and Natalie on the back deck, the morning light just starting to come up over the water. They were standing close, voices low but clear enough on the recording. Peter rubbed the back of his neck. She's been so sensitive about everything lately. Every time I try to take something off her plate, she acts like I'm pushing her out. You're the only one who doesn't make it complicated. Natalie nodded, her hand resting on the railing near his. I know. I'm here for whatever you need. Quinn means well, but maybe it's better if we just handle the details this week. Let her relax. She'll be happier that way. Peter gave a small laugh that didn't sound like him. Yeah, you always know how to keep the peace. I watched the clip 3 times, my throat tight. Then I put the phone down and sat in the dark, listening to the waves hit the rocks below the bluff. The envelope had been one thing. The footage was something else entirely. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was my husband and my best friend building a version of our life that didn't really include me. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the two of them on the deck, heads bent together like they were protecting something fragile. Or maybe protecting themselves from having to deal with me. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching the fog burn off the water. My chest hurt in a way that felt both old and brand new. I had spent years trying to be the easy one, the one who didn't make waves, the one who fit into Peter's family without asking for too much space. But the papers in my bag and the footage on my phone were telling me a different story. One where I had already been moved to the edges without anyone telling me the rules had changed. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I only knew I couldn't keep pretending I hadn't seen what I had seen. The morning light was just starting to cut through the fog when I heard Peter's footsteps on the stairs. I stayed at the window a little longer, the coffee mug warm in my hands, trying to steady myself. The footage was still playing in my head on a loop. His voice, the way he laughed with her, The easy way they decided things about our life without me in the room. I had spent the night turning it over, looking for any other way to read it. Maybe he really did think he was protecting me. Maybe Natalie really was just being a good friend. But the words were too clear, and the exclusion felt too deliberate. Peter came into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, and poured himself coffee without saying much at first. I watched him for a second, remembering how he used to pull me close in the mornings at the cottage, whispering plans for the day. That version of us felt far away now. "Peter," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady, even though my chest was tight. "Can we talk for a minute before everyone else gets up?" He glanced at me, eyebrows lifting just a little like he was already bracing for something. "Sure, what's up?" I took a breath. "I saw the messages. The ones you and Natalie sent about the contractor and moving money from the joint account. And I checked the security footage from yesterday morning on the deck." His face changed fast. First surprise, then that quick defensive set to his jaw I had started to recognize. He set his mug down harder than he needed to. "Quinn, you went through my stuff." "It was in the drawer in our room," I said. "And the cameras are for the whole property. I wasn't trying to spy, I needed to understand why you and my best friend are making decisions about our money and our family's cottage without telling me." He ran a hand over his face and let out a short laugh that didn't have any warmth in it. "You're reading way too much into this. Natalie was just helping me get a couple of quotes so I could surprise everyone with the updates this week. You've been stressed about work and everything else. I thought I was doing you a favor by handling it." The words landed exactly like they had in the texts. Handling it. Protecting me from the details. I felt something small and important inside me shift. "Peter, it's not about the quotes," I said, and my voice came out softer than I wanted, more wounded. "It's about you turning to her instead of me. It's about family plans and money decisions happening in texts I'm not part of. It's about you telling her I overthink everything and that it's easier without me involved. That hurts. It makes me feel like I'm on the outside of my own life." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. The same look he got when he was deciding whether to push back or smooth things over. "You're making this into something it's not. Natalie gets it because she's not emotionally invested in every little thing. She helps keep the peace with my parents. You always turn these gatherings into something heavy. I was trying to keep it light for once." The dismissal was so clean, so practiced, that it took my breath for a second. He wasn't even pretending it was a misunderstanding anymore. He was telling me straight that my feelings were the problem and that Natalie was the solution. I didn't cry. I just nodded once, because anything more would have cracked me open right there in the kitchen, with his parents possibly waking up any minute. "Okay," I said. "I hear you." He seemed relieved that I wasn't pushing harder. He even reached over and squeezed my shoulder, like that small touch could reset everything. "Good. Let's just enjoy the week, all right? No more digging into things that don't matter." I didn't answer. I just took my coffee out onto the porch and watched the water while the rest of the house started to stir. The day moved in that strange, suspended way gatherings sometimes do, people drifting between the cottage and the beach, conversations starting and stopping, plans being made in corners I wasn't standing in. At lunch on the deck, Peter and Natalie sat at the far end of the table with Patricia and Larry, talking about possible weekend activities. I caught fragments. "Natalie thinks the tide pools would be perfect, and we can handle the reservations." While I sat closer to Olivia and Tina. Olivia kept glancing at me, her expression quiet, but not unkind. She didn't say anything, but the look felt like the smallest acknowledgement that she saw what was happening. Later, while most of them were down on the sand, Wayne Bailey walked over from next door again, his dog trotting ahead of him. He nodded at me where I was sitting on the steps. "Still sorting out those cottage plans?" he asked, friendly as ever. "Saw Peter and Natalie heading out early again this morning with some folders. They look like they were on a mission. Hope it all works out smooth for you folks." I managed another smile, but inside the confirmation landed heavy. Another morning meeting I hadn't been told about. Another moment where my best friend and my husband were building something without me. By the time evening came and everyone gathered for dinner, the air in the cottage felt thicker. Patricia had made a big lasagna, the kind she always did for these weeks. The table was crowded with plates and glasses and the low hum of conversation. Peter was at the head, Natalie on his right, me on his left, but somehow feeling farther away than the length of the table. Halfway through the meal, Larry brought up the railing project again. "Peter, you and Natalie got those numbers worked out? We were thinking we could get started before the weather turns." Peter nodded, not even glancing my way. "Yeah, we're good. Natalie found a guy who can do it for a fair price. We'll pull from the account and get it done." I felt every eye at the table shift, even if they tried not to show it. The "we" hung in the air like it belonged to the two of them. I set my fork down carefully. "Peter," I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. "I'd like to see the numbers before anything comes out of our joint account. And I'd like to be part of the conversation about what we're doing with the cottage. That's supposed to be for all of us." The table went quiet in that particular way that happens when someone says the thing everyone has been pretending not to notice. Patricia looked down at her plate. Larry cleared his throat. Natalie's expression stayed soft, almost pitying. Peter's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice, but the words came out clipped and cold. "Quinn, this is exactly what I was talking about this morning. You turn every single thing into a fight. Natalie and I already handled it. You don't need to make it about you." The dismissal was public this time. It wasn't just between us anymore. It was in front of his parents, in front of my best friend, in front of the cousin who had barely spoken all week. I felt the heat rise in my face, and the old familiar ache of being made small in the place that was supposed to feel like home. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him for a long second, then at Natalie, who was suddenly very interested in her water glass. Then I stood up, murmured something about needing air, and walked out onto the porch. The waves were loud below the bluff. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of salt and cold. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to breathe through the shaking in my hands. This was the moment I had been circling since I found the envelope. The moment where the carefully built story I told myself about my marriage and my place in this family cracked all the way open. Behind me, the door opened and closed. I didn't turn around right away. Part of me hoped it was Peter coming to say he was sorry, that he hadn't meant it, that we could fix this. But when I finally looked, it was Olivia standing a few feet away, her arms crossed against the chill, her face still quiet, but her eyes steady. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there with me in the wind, both of us looking out at the dark water. Then, so softly I almost missed it, she spoke. "I saw the way he talked to you in there," she said. "And I've seen the way he and Natalie have been these last couple of days. It's not right, Quinn. You shouldn't have to fight to be included in your own family." The words were simple. They weren't dramatic or loud, but they were the first time anyone in that cottage had said out loud what I had been feeling for months. I felt something loosen in my chest, even as the sadness pressed in harder. Because if even quiet Olivia could see it, then maybe I wasn't imagining the slow, careful way I had been moved to the edges. I didn't answer her right away. I just nodded once, because my throat was too tight for anything else. We stood there together for another minute, the waves crashing below us, the lights from the cottage windows warm behind our backs. Then she touched my arm lightly, almost like she was making sure I was still there, and went back inside. I stayed on the porch a long time after that. The wind was cold, but it felt cleaner than the air inside. I thought about the envelope still in my bag. I thought about the footage on my phone. I thought about every small exclusion that had led to this moment, the texts I wasn't on the plans made without me, the way Peter had started treating Natalie like the easier, better version of the partner he wanted. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I only knew that something had shifted in me on that porch, something quiet but permanent. The version of me who would have gone back inside and smiled through the rest of the week to keep the peace was already starting to feel like someone I used to be. Inside, I could hear the low murmur of voices picking up again. Peter's laugh carried through the window, easy and unbothered. Natalie's voice answered him. The annual gathering was still happening, the family routines still moving forward. But I was standing outside in the dark, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to find my way back in. The wind stayed sharp on the porch long after Olivia went back inside. I stood there until my fingers went numb around my arms, listening to the waves and the muffled voices drifting through the windows. Peter's laugh carried again, easy and unbothered, the way it always did when he decided a conversation was over. Natalie's voice answered him. The rest of the family picked up the rhythm of the evening like nothing had cracked open at the table. I didn't go back in right away. I let the cold settle into my bones because it felt cleaner than the warmth behind me. When I finally stepped through the door, the room went quiet for half a second before Patricia asked if I wanted dessert. I shook my head and said I was tired. No one pushed. Peter didn't look at me when I walked past him to the stairs. That night I lay awake again, but this time the looping thoughts were different. Not just the hurt of the texts and the footage, not just the way he had spoken to me in front of everyone. It was the realization that this wasn't new. It had been building for months, maybe longer. The annual gathering had always been the one place where I felt like I belonged to his family, not just beside him. Now even that felt borrowed. The next morning the house woke slowly. Fog hung low over the water again. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table alone for a while, the envelope from the drawer resting in my lap like a weight I couldn't set down. I had carried it upstairs the night before without really deciding what to do with it. Now in the gray light, I knew I couldn't keep carrying it in silence. Everyone drifted in eventually. Patricia started breakfast. Larry talked about checking the deck railing one more time before they left. Olivia came in last, giving me a small, steady nod when our eyes met. Natalie and Peter were the last to appear, talking quietly as they poured coffee. They sat at the table like the night before had never happened. I waited until the plates were mostly empty and the conversation had settled into that comfortable post-breakfast lull. Then I placed the envelope in the center of the table. I found this in the bedroom drawer 2 days ago, I said, keeping my voice even though my heart was beating hard enough to feel in my throat. Printed messages between Peter and Natalie about the cottage repairs, about moving money from our joint account, about how it was easier to handle things without me involved because I overthink everything. I also checked the security footage from the deck yesterday morning. I heard what you both said about me being too sensitive and how it was better to manage the details without me. The silence that followed was different from the night before. Heavier. Patricia's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Larry set his fork down slowly. Tina looked between all of us like she wished she could disappear. Olivia stayed very still, her eyes on the envelope. Peter's face flushed, but not with embarrassment, with the quick, sharp anger I had seen the day before. "Quinn, what the hell are you doing? You're really going to do this in front of my parents?" Natalie shifted in her chair, her voice soft and reasonable in a way that made my stomach turn. "Quinn, those messages were private. Peter was just trying to keep things simple so you wouldn't stress. We were thinking of you." I looked at her, then really looked at the woman who had been my best friend for years. "You were thinking of me by talking about me like I was a problem to work around, by helping him exclude me from decisions about money and this place that's supposed to be for all of us." Peter pushed his chair back a little, the legs scraping loud on the floor. "You're blowing this up because you're insecure. Natalie has been helping me because she actually listens, instead of turning everything into a fight. You've been like this for months, always needing to be the center of every conversation, always making the gathering about your feelings instead of just enjoying it." The words hit exactly where he meant them to. They were the same ones he had used in the text, now said out loud with his whole family watching. I felt the old reflex to shrink, to apologize, to make it easier for everyone else. But something in me had already broken past that. Before I could answer, Olivia spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the still room. "Quinn isn't making it up," she said, looking straight at Peter. "I've watched you leave her out of conversations all week. I've seen you and Natalie planning things and then acting surprised when she asks to be included. She's not overreacting. She's asking to be treated like she matters." The room went even quieter. Patricia looked at Olivia like she had never heard her speak that many words at once. Larry cleared his throat again, but didn't say anything. Tina stared at her plate. Natalie's sympathetic expression faltered for the first time. Peter's jaw worked for a second before he found his voice again. "Olivia, this is between me and my wife. You don't know what goes on when we're not here. Quinn has a habit of twisting things when she feels left out. I was trying to protect her from stressing about money and plans she doesn't need to manage." He turned back to me, and the look in his eyes was colder than the wind off the water. "If you want to keep turning this into a scene, that's on you. But the rest of us are here to enjoy the week. You can either calm down and be part of it, or you can keep making everything about you." That was the moment I understood the choice in front of me. Not a dramatic explosion or a fight I could win, just a quiet, painful fork in the road. I could stay smile through the rest of the days, pretend the envelope and the footage and the words at the table hadn't happened, and keep the annual gathering as the one thread still connecting me to this family. Or I could choose myself, even if it meant cutting that thread. I stood up slowly. My hands were steady now. "I'm not going to calm down and be part of something that requires me to stay small," I said, looking at Peter, then at Natalie, then at Patricia and Larry. "I love this place. I used to love these weeks, but I won't keep showing up to be managed and excluded while everyone pretends it's for my own good. I'm leaving this afternoon." Patricia made a small sound, like she wanted to protest, but couldn't find the words. Larry just nodded once, almost to himself. Olivia's eyes stayed on me steady and sad at the same time. Natalie looked away. Peter's face went blank in that way it did when he decided something no longer required his energy. He didn't argue. He didn't ask me to stay. He just said, "Do what you need to do, Quinn." Like I was a decision he had already made peace with. I packed my bag while the others finished breakfast. No one came upstairs to talk me out of it. When I carried my things to the car, Wayne Bailey was outside again walking his dog. He raised a hand in a small wave, but didn't ask questions this time. Maybe he could see it on my face. The drive back up the coast felt longer than it should have. The cottage disappeared in the rearview mirror, and with it went the version of the annual gathering I had held on to for years. The one where I belonged, without having to fight for space. The one where Peter and I made decisions together, and my best friend was someone I could trust. That version had been a carefully built myth, and the envelope and the footage had torn it open in a way I couldn't stitch back together. I cried a little on the drive. Not loud, just quiet tears that came and went with the curves in the road. Not because I regretted choosing to leave, because I was grieving the loss of something I had loved, even if it had never been as solid as I wanted it to be. The shared routines, the familiar laughter around that table, the feeling of being part of a family tradition that stretched back before me. Those things were gone now, or at least changed into something I couldn't participate in without erasing myself. When I got home to our apartment, the quiet felt different. Not peaceful yet, just empty in a way that would take time to fill. I put the envelope in a drawer I wouldn't open for a while. I deleted the security footage from my phone, but kept the memory of it. Some things you don't need to replay to know they happened. In the weeks that followed, Peter and I talked in short, careful conversations. He didn't fight hard for me to come back to the next gathering. He said it might be better if I took some space. Natalie stopped texting me. The family group chat went quiet on my end. The annual cottage week became something that happened without me, and the ache of that loss settled into a steady, quiet place in my chest. But something else settled there too. A clearer sense of what I would and wouldn't accept anymore. I started saying no to plans that required me to shrink. I stopped explaining my boundaries like they were negotiable. I reached out to people who made space for me without me having to earn it. The myth of the perfect family gathering and the supportive husband who always had my back had been destroyed, but what grew in its place was something smaller and truer. Me choosing myself, even when it cost something I had loved. I still think about that week sometimes, especially when the fog rolls in over the coast. I think about the envelope in the drawer and the footage on the phone and the way Olivia's quiet voice cut through the silence at the table. I think about the painful choice I made on the porch and in the kitchen the next morning. It wasn't the victory I might have wanted. Peter kept the family routines and the influence he had always held. The annual gathering continued without me. But I kept something more important. I kept the knowledge that I would never again let myself be managed out of my own life for the sake of keeping the peace. Boundaries aren't always loud. Sometimes they're the quiet decision to walk away from a table where you're no longer welcome as your full self. Sometimes they're the hard, heavy work of grieving what you thought you had so you can stop pretending it was enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to choose yourself, even when it meant losing something you once held dear, I hope you know you're not alone in that weight. Comment strength if you felt this.